Okay, now we're going to finish part 3 of chapter 5 of Their Eyes Are Watching God. Please answer the true and false questions as you listen.
All of them, all of the people took it up and sang it over and over till it was wrung dry and no further innovations of tone and tempo were conceivable. Then they hushed and ate barbecue. When it was all over that night in bed, Jody asked Janie, "Well, honey, how you like being Mrs. Mayor?" "It's all right, I reckon. But don't you think it keeps us in a kind of strain?" "Strain? You mean the cooking and waiting on folks?" "No, Jody. It just looks like it keeps us in some way we ain't natural with one another. You was always off talking and fixing things, and I feels like I'm just marking time. Hope it soon gets over." "Over, Janie? My God, I ain't even started good. I told you in the very first beginning that I aim to be a big voice. You ought to be glad, because that makes a big woman out of you." A feeling of coldness and fear took hold of her. She felt far away from things and lonely. Janie soon began to feel the impact of awe and envy against her sensibilities. The wife of the mayor was not just another woman as she had supposed. She slept with authority, and so she was part of it in the town mind. She couldn't get but so close to most of them in spirit. It was especially noticeable after Joe had forced through a town ditch to drain the street in front of the store. They had murmured hotly about slavery being over, but every man filled his assignment. There was something about Joe Starks that cowed the town. It was not because of physical fear. He was no fist fighter. His bulk was not even imposing as men go. Neither was it because he was more literate than the rest. Something else made men give way before him. He had a bow down command in his face, and every step he took made the thing more tangible. Take, for instance, that new house of his. It had 2 stories with porches, with banisters and such things. The rest of the town looked like servants' quarters surrounding the big house. And different from everybody else in the town, he put off moving in until it had been painted in and out. And look at the way he painted it. A glowy, sparkly white. The kind of promenading white that the houses of Bishop Whipple, W.B. Jackson, and the Vanderpool's wore. It made the village feel funny talking to him, just like he was anybody else. Then there was the matter of the spittoons. No sooner was he all set as the mayor, postmaster, landlord, storekeeper than he bought a desk like Mr. Hill or Mr. Galloway over in Maitland, with one of those swing-around chairs to it. What with him biting down on cigars and saving his breath on talk and swinging around in that chair, it weakened people. And then he spit in that gold-looking vase that anybody else would have been glad to put on their front room table. Said it was a spittoon, just like his used-to-be boss man used to have in his bank up there in Atlanta. Didn't have to get up and go to the door every time he had to spit. Didn't spit on his floor neither. Had that golded-up spitting pot right handy. But he went further than that. He bought a little lady-sized spitting pot for Janie to spit in. Had it right in the parlor with little sprigs of flowers painted all around the sides. It took people by surprise because most of the women dipped snuff and, of course, had a spit cup in the house. But how could they know up-to-date folks were spitting in flowery little things like that? It sort of made the rest of them feel that they had been taken advantage of, like things had been kept from them. Maybe more things in the world besides spitting pots had been hid from them when they wasn't told no better than to spit in tomato cans. It was bad enough for white people, but when one of your own color could be so different, It put you on a wonder. It was like seeing your sister turn into a gator, a familiar strangeness. You kept seeing your sister in the gator, and the gator in your sister, and you'd rather not. There was no doubt that the town respected him and even admired him in a way. But any man who walks in the way of power and property is bound to meet hate. So when Speaker stood up when the occasion demanded and said, "Our beloved mayor," it was one of those statements that everybody says, but nobody actually believes, like God is everywhere. It was just a handle to wind up the tongue with. As time went on, and the benefits he had conferred upon the town receded in time, they sat on his store porch while he was busy inside and discussed him. Like one day after he caught Henry Pitts with a wagon load of his ribbon cane and took the cane away from Pitts and made him leave town. Some of them thought Starks ought not to have done that. He had so much cane and everything else. But they didn't say that while Joe Starks was on the porch. When the mail came from Maitland and he went inside to sort it out, everybody had their say. Sim Jones started off as soon as he was sure that Starks couldn't hear him. "It's a sin and a shame running that poor man away from here like that. Colored folks oughtn't to be so hard on one another." "I don't see it that way at all," Sam Watson said shortly. "Let colored folks learn to work for what they get like everybody else. Nobody ain't stopped Pitts from planting the cane he wanted to. Starks give him a job. What more do he want?" "I know that too," Jones said. "But Sam, Joe Starks is too exact with folks. All he got, he done made it off for the rest of us. He didn't have all that when he come here." "Yeah, but none of all this you see and you setting on wasn't here neither when he come. Give the devil his due. But now, Sam, you know that all he do is big belly around and tell other folks what to do. He loves obedience out of everybody under the sound of his voice. You can feel the switch in his hand when he's talking to you," Oscar Scott complained. "That chastising feeling he totes sort of gives you the prolapsus of the quaternary lining." "He's a whirlwind among breezes," Jeff Bruce threw in. "Speaking of winds, he is the wind and we's the grass. We bend whichever way he blows," Sam Watson agreed. "But at that, us needs him. The town wouldn't be nothing if it wasn't for him. He can't help being sort of bossy. Some folks needs thrones and ruling chairs and crowns to make their influence felt. He don't. He got a throne in the seat of his pants." "What I don't like about the man is he talks to unlettered folks with books in his jaws," Hicks complained, "showing off his learning. To look at me, you wouldn't think it, but I got a brother passing up round O'Connor that got good learning. If he was here, Joe Starks wouldn't make no fool out of him like he do the rest of y'all. I often wonder how that little wife of his makes out with him, 'cause he's a man that changes everything, but nothing don't change him. You know, millions of times I done thought about that myself. He gets on her every now and then when she make little mistakes around the stove. What makes her keep her head tied up like some old woman around the stove? Nobody couldn't get me to tie no rag on my head if I had hair like that. Maybe he make her do it. Maybe he scared some of the rest of us men might touch it round that stove. It sure is a hidden mystery to me. She sure don't talk much. The way he rares and pitches in the stove sometimes when she make a mistake is sort of ungodly, but she don't seem to mind at all. Reckon they understand one another." The town had a basket full of feelings, good and bad, about Joe's positions and possessions, but none had the temerity to challenge him. They bowed down to him, rather, because he was all of these things. And then again, he was all of these things because the town bowed down. Every morning, the world flung itself over and exposed the town to the sun. So Janie had another day, and every day had a store in it, except Sundays. The store itself was a pleasant place if only she didn't have to sell things. When the people sat around on the porch and passed around the pictures of their thoughts for the others to look at and see, it was nice. The fact that the thought pictures were always crayon enlargements of life made it even nicer to listen to. Take, for instance, the case of Matt Bonner's yellow mule. They had him up for conversation every day the Lord sent, most especially if Matt was there himself to listen. Sam and Lige and Walter were the ringleaders of the mule talkers. The others threw in whatever they could chance upon. But it seemed as if Sam and Lige and Walter could hear and see more about that mule than the whole county put together. All they needed was to see Matt's long, spare shape coming down the street, and by the time he got to the porch, they were ready for him. Hello, Matt. Evening, Sam. Mighty glad you come along right now, Matt.
Okay. Actually, we went past a little bit past on chapter 5.